Hi and welcome to OUTthink. I'm Lawrence Akers. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, member of the LGBTQI community, and a passionate advocate for mental health. These podcasts have been made in the hope of sharing insight into issues that impact on the LGBTQI community. I'm going to pass it over to my guest for this week to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Joe Buzzertle, and I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, counsellor and lecturer, and I'm glad to be here. Hi Lawrence.
Hello. So this week we're going to be exploring what it's like for a gay man to have his life impacted by ill health to the point of making him become disabled. And this is something that's happened for Joey?
Yes, probably about under 2 years ago now, I experienced a disability.
So tell us a little bit about your story there in terms of what has happened over the past couple of years.
Well, I was on holidays. Actually, I was off to one of the Atlantis cruises in Asia, and I was in Singapore probably about 18 months ago, and I I started to experience weakness of the muscles in my leg, and I stopped being able to walk. So through that experience, I had to come back from the trip. I didn't get to go on the cruise, which is unfortunate. And I ended up going to hospital and finding out that I had I've got a condition called vasculitis, which is it's a nerve condition, and it sort of falls in the family of MS and neuromotor disease. But the good thing is that this condition is curable. And yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey to learn how to walk again, to, surrender and give up a lot of things that I would normally do. And now, reestablish myself back on the world, back on the gay scene, back on the gay world in a way.
So what did you really notice was different between where you were prior to this illness and when the disability was at its full flight?
Well, I guess the first, if I can compare it to the medical part of it, I think I didn't notice the signs. So before I got sick, I probably had these signs that were telling me that I was going to get sick. So, for example, I experienced twitching of the eye, and at one point there was like a blurriness of my left eye. I experienced pains down my left arm. I was constantly tired, and I just considered those to be being overworked because I was working a lot. And the thing that I've learned through this process is that I used to think that stress was only a negative feeling, but I was obviously in stress because I was working long hours and not eating well, but I didn't really consider it to be stress. So that was probably the first thing, that I had all these signs going on, but I was quite active. I had quite a full life. I was, loving my job, busy, and then getting sick, everything had to stop. So that was a really big thing that I had to get used to. Like, I had to move back in with my parents, because I couldn't walk. I had to cut back on my work. I didn't see my friends because I couldn't be social. So everything changed. So, it was sort of like a new me was created in a way.
So what kind of thoughts did you have during that time? Like, I imagine that suddenly finding yourself being unable to walk would be quite confronting for most people. Yeah. What kind of things were you thinking and telling yourself at that time?
Well, it's interesting, Lawrence, because you would think that I would have been freaked out, but I wasn't. I got freaked out probably 8 months later. So I think because I'm a therapist and because I've done a lot of work on myself mentally, I was sort of like prepared. I thought, okay, well, this is the way it is. And I was positive. I sort of kept myself in a positive state of mind. Mm-hmm. But what had happened was, I was planning to go to America in December of that year that I got sick. So I got sick in March, and the doctor had told me that I could go. And then when it came closer to December and the doctor said, you can't go, that's when it hit me that I was sick. So it's really unusual. So from March till about December, I was really positive. I was eating well. I was doing all the right stuff. And then I probably went into a bit of depression, or a bit of, not anxiety, but a little bit of self-doubt in December and January, that summer. So the summer of 2015 and 16, it impacted me, and I probably had a relapse. So I sort of had the second stage of being sick, where my mind was part of it. My mind became part of the illness. So it's interesting because I guess for some people, they may not have the tools to deal with being ill or being disabled. So they end up going into that sort of panic state. Well, I sort of found that I didn't do that, and I never really panicked, but I sort of became more doubtful that I was going to get better a lot later.
I think what was interesting for me, and I should share with everyone that Joe and I have known each other for a good 25 years or something, was that how it appeared on perhaps even social media was that you would have days where you seemed quite positive and quite focused on being able to move forward. But then there are other days where you were quite open to be vulnerable and to allow yourself to be okay with not being okay, which was quite an interesting thing to view. I think it allowed us from the outside to feel more of a connection to you in that sense, and to understand this journey a little bit more.
Yeah, it's hard to explain because I don't consider that as those days to be dark days, but yet it's interesting that they were. I just found it really helpful being, in bed, being at my parents' house, not seeing my friends, not doing my normal routine every day. I found that I was comfortable to share those moments when I was a little bit annoyed. And it was like, I sort of describe it a little bit like popping a balloon. It's like I needed to pop that balloon, so I couldn't talk to maybe my parents because, they're too close to me or whatever. But like I was able to just put it on social media and get that release. And the interesting thing about that is that I wouldn't do it for anything more than myself, but I would receive hundreds of private messages on Facebook for people saying, thank you for sharing that because I've gone through a similar thing and I didn't tell anyone, or, you've given me the courage to face my own disability or my own illness. So that was really, really interesting how we don't really know anyone, do we? So being vulnerable on Facebook allowed others to then be vulnerable, which I thought was quite humbling.
That's actually quite an interesting concept. So, in some ways it's like people are putting onto Facebook a version of them that they feel is going to be publicly acceptable or socially acceptable. But quite often there's all this undercurrent of...
I think it's tolerance, Lawrence. It's people being tolerant of what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And I know within myself that I tried really hard not to be negative or to talk in a venting way as often because I could tell that maybe some people might, and I can't control them, but some people might find it a little bit boring or a bit of a downer, so I tried to just do it when it was needed, because I think that sometimes the Facebook community can be a little bit, they want one dimension. I think you're totally right. I would, as therapists, we already know that everyone's got secrets and, hidden thoughts and doubts and all that sort of stuff tucked away in their brain. So, to be able to say it out loud was a bit of a brave thing because it was, I remember writing one at 2 a.m. and I was crying when I was writing it. It was really raw. It's like when I realized that, I had my second relapse and when I realized that I may not be able to walk again. Because the doctors didn't know, and just saying it and just writing it, I felt good writing it, but then I felt good, I went to bed, and then I woke up to hundreds of messages from people, and I wasn't really expecting people to even read it. Yeah. So that was really the just sort of eye opener. I'm going, oh my God, people are reading what I'm writing. And so then I started writing a blog, and sharing my negative feelings on that because I found it a lot more helpful to just post it on the blog rather than posting it on Facebook. The blog is really interesting because I wrote it in 2 parts. So the first part would be Joey, the confident, the positive go-getter, and then there'd be this break in the page, and then my alter ego Bob would come in and he'd be really nasty and he'd be swearing at the nurses and the doctors. So it was really good to have that duality thing going on.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to assume that I would know what kind of emotions that an event or a circumstance like this would bring up. I would assume that something like frustration and anger would be appropriate. But what kind of range of emotions did this experience bring up for you?
Again, great question. It's the main thing that I felt, which may not make sense to the listeners, is it wasn't emotions based around my condition. It was emotions based around being abandoned by a lot of my friends and a lot of my gay friends. So that's the thing that I probably faced the most. That was, I could deal with, not walking. I actually, in a way, got really sort of used to the disability quickly because, I could watch Game of Thrones and just sit in bed and get my dinner made for me. And I sort of looked at it as a bit of a break. I always believed that I was going to get better, and there were days when it was frustrating. So they're the medical things. It was frustrating. I had to learn to be patient. So there was a little bit of intolerance there. Like, when am I going to get better? But I learned really quickly to surrender. But I couldn't put my head around the abandonment part, where I'm talking about best friends not ringing me or not returning my calls or not coming to see me. And that was a hard thing. And so I tried to put my head around, is it because they couldn't cope with the illness, or is it because they wanted fun Joey only? So, and I still don't know the answer.
Is this something that you're still working through at the moment?
Well, I think I'm coming to the end of it because I just, I did a big Facebook cull, and I just, I've deleted those people out of my phone book. It did take me all this time to come to that conclusion. At the beginning, I guess I was taking it personally, and I was sort of thinking there was a lot of why questions, but now I'm not asking those why questions anymore because I know it's not about me, it's about them. And, maybe the getting ill was, another way for myself to learn that, new things are evolving in my life. I'm changing, like I'm not the same person anymore. Once upon a time, I could walk and jump and run and dance and do all those things. Now I can't do a lot of those things. And so it changes you as a person. And I don't want to go back to what I was before because I've learned so much through this experience. I mean, simple things like compassion and gratitude. And, if I could just, teach or show everyone how we take things in life for granted, that would be the biggest joy, because you don't realize unless you are in it. And that's one thing that I've learned about compassion, is that you don't really understand when someone says I've got cancer, or someone says, someone's died or someone's ill. You don't know what they're going through because you don't know. So when you go through something of trauma and crisis yourself, I had to realize that people don't know what I'm going through. And one of the other things I guess that was difficult was, in the early stages, I lost a lot of weight, so it was obvious that I was sick. But then as I started to look normal again, people just assumed that I was okay. When I started learning how to walk again, people assumed that I was okay, but they had no real comprehension of the pain that I was in, or the, little things like it took an hour to get dressed, or, the fact that I still couldn't bend my knees or climb stairs. So people then dismiss that you're sick. And so that's why I'm thinking that could be another reason why people abandoned me, or they sort of didn't make contact. Yeah. And I don't know if it's a gay thing or not, because I found that a lot of my straight friends, a lot of girls especially, they all stepped up, but it's the gay boys that sort of stepped away. So I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
One of the themes that have been reoccurring here since the start of this conversation has been around the topic of change and rebirth in some ways. Mm-hmm. You mentioned very early on at the start of this podcast about how you're a different person now to what you were before the illness. And it was something that you mentioned, not too far back as well. In what ways are you different? In what ways have you changed? And perhaps even in what ways are you better, and in what ways are you worse?
I know that now I really have simplified my life. So when you're a manic running around with like a chicken without a head person, like I was before the illness, I probably didn't I took things for granted. And that could be another explanation to maybe why I've lost some of my friends. Like, they were just people. And so the first thing is I've gone from thinking that I had to be friends with all the people I knew to now knowing that I've got probably a handful of really close friends. And those people have made it really obvious in the time I've been sick. So that's been really nice. I've really simplified my life. Like, again, I notice things now. So when I have like a little milestone, it's like New Year's Eve. It's really, really cute. It's really, really cute. Like, even something as simple as you inviting me to Coldplay. I'm going to Coldplay with Lawrence, everyone. Yeah. So like it's not a little thing, but it's like, it's a milestone. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to go to a concert. Last week I went to Chapel Street for the first time in 18 months. I cried all the way home. Because like, again, you don't realize. And, so I think I won't take things for granted ever again. I'm really humbled by, for example, the closeness now that I've got with my family that I took for granted before I got sick. So like, for my mum to wash me and bathe me and dress me and all that stuff, of course, is going to bond you and make you closer. For them to take me in and look after me unconditionally, to pack my house up when I had to move in with them and I couldn't walk. You take things, I take those relationships and those situations more seriously now. So that's really, really nice. But I'd say the biggest thing is I've learnt to surrender. And what I mean by that is that you have to totally have 100% faith that you're going to be okay. And what I found has happened because of that is everything that I want has happened. So I got a new job. I ended up opening up a new clinic. I bought a new car, bought a new house, and I did all while I was disabled. Well, before I was disabled, they were going to be things. I'm going to get a new car. I'm going to get a new house. I'm going to get a new clinic. But they were always on the back burner because I was always busy. So it sort of has put things in priority, and surrendering is really a great thing because it just means that you're not scared. Just to give you an example, I would always say every morning when I first got ill, when I was in the wheelchair, why am I not walking? I want to walk. Why can't I walk? So I was attaching. And then someone said to me, you have to stop doing that. You've got to surrender. The hard part is you've got to actually say that you're disabled. I said, I don't want to say that. But then once I said I was disabled, I started walking. So it was really an interesting concept to understand that when you actually surrender to what's going on in your life, when you just accept the things that's going on, you then have opportunities to change it. But when you're attaching to it, all you're really doing is just reinforcing that problem. I found that really interesting. That's the biggest change.
For those of our listeners who may not understand what attachment is, did you want to explain a little bit about that concept?
Okay, so attachment is when you believe or think that the thing that you're thinking or doing is the only option. So if I want to make it a really simple situation, it's when, if someone, for example, says, I can't do that speech in public, then that word can't is the attachment. So the surrendering is, not thinking anything and just seeing what happens. And that gives you opportunities. So yeah, it may be a disaster, but it could also be amazing. It could also be funny. It could also be scary. It could also be exhilarating. So you give yourself an opportunity for all the spectrum of things to happen.
And what I'm hearing there is that you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone too, which I think is where real significant great change can happen.
Well, I don't think I meant to. I just think it sort of happened by itself. I mean, to be honest, Lawrence, if I was given an opportunity not to get sick, I would have said, I don't want to get sick because it's not. But at the same time, I'm grateful that I've changed. But I mean, 2015 wasn't a very good, year. It was hard. But I think that I needed to, and just to get a little bit metaphorish, it's like I feel like I've shed my skin. I've shed my skin and was able to change. And through that process as a gay man, I had to learn to re-establish contacts, had to re-establish my perception on my body. That was a big one. Re-establish my viewpoint on sex and my sexuality, and not sexuality, but more my sex drive, the medication I was on, and, also trying to understand how do my peers or other gay men perceive me now. While I worked very, very hard for many, many years to create an image of myself through going to the gym, through, being muscular, through my look, and come in this illness one day, all that was wiped away. And having to change that was difficult because in a way you sort of don't know who you are anymore. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I think looking back now, it was a good thing.
We were talking before also about your mum having to bathe you. Mm-hmm. And for someone who, was an independent adult, how did you find having to put yourself in situations where you needed other people to assist you to get things done?
Yeah, I normally am quite independent. So it was tough at the beginning. And I, for those listeners, I was Lawrence's lecturer at a school that he studied hypnotherapy in, and I remember going to school in the wheelchair, and I was damned if I was not going to lecture, even though I was really sick and I was not able to walk. But looking back now, I don't know why I did that. Thinking I was so freaking stubborn, I was going to do it. Yes, it was inspiring. Yes, I did it, but in reality, I should have been resting and I should have just taken time off. So it was difficult at first, but like now I've learned to understand that I need help, and I understand that I don't want to be independent anymore. That I want to be part of a community or part of a group. And that's, I think, goes back to the friend thing, is that now I really respect and love and have time for people that I'm really close to. And I don't really want to waste time anymore with this, the fleeting people, or I call them the sun chasers, the people that just want to be in the sun. They don't want to go into the darkness. And, I went into the darkness for 18 months, and so they were nowhere to be seen. So it's sort of like I can establish now who those people are, and I allow them to help. Yeah, I'm still a little bit independent, but not probably as independent as I was before I got ill.
You mentioned before that you had worked quite hard on creating an image of yourself, and that was largely around how you presented yourself out there, working on your body, attitude as well. How has that changed through this? How do you perceive that previous version of yourself now?
Oh my God, that's the biggest one. I was driven to be a muscle Mary. And so I remember when I was young and someone came up to me at the Exchange Hotel in my 20s and said to me, how long have you been positive? How long have you been sick? And that really shocked me. I'm going, what? Do I look sick? And I was obviously a thin lad. That was my driver to go to the gym. But more importantly, I think that was my realization that the only way that you get noticed in the gay world, well, I thought, was to have a body. And so I did that for a while. I also did it for fitness and health and all that sort of stuff, but more so I liked the results I got. I liked the way that I was introduced into that fun world, I call it. But and then, before I got ill, I thought my body was still okay. I still had the definition that I liked as an older gay guy. So when I got ill, I lost a lot of weight. But the main thing is that vasculitis is a nerve condition. And so if you want to imagine, the nerves speak to the brain that speaks through the muscles. And so when the nerves have got a condition like vasculitis, there's a blockage. So that message isn't getting through. And so all my muscles within one day, not like 1 week or not 1 month, but one day, they all died. So all that hard work is like a deflated balloon. It was so disgusting for me. And I remember when I first saw myself in the mirror, I looked like 100 years old, and I just went, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And so it's been a journey, because that condition stayed for months. And so now that my nerves are healing, because just for those that want to understand nerves, a nerve fiber heals 1 millimeter every month, right? So that's 1 millimeter. I've got 137 millimeters of damage. So that's many years. So I've come to terms with that now. And now I'm noticing, I'm maybe halfway or, near the point where they're healing really effectively. And I can see the muscles now starting to flare up again because the nerves are talking to them. So it's interesting that you asked this question, because I was, once I started to get a bit more healthy, I started doing push-ups. And then I said to myself, why am I doing this? Do I really want to go back to that world? Do I really need to prove anything to someone? And so it's now more for me. So that's been an interesting thing. I mean, one of my favorite books, as you know, is The Velvet Rage, and it talks about how gay men go through stages and how body image and dysmorphia is a big part of that for most gay men, being accepted and so on. And so when you're forced to go through a metamorphosis, it's different to thinking about it. Again, it's hard to explain because it's what I'm going through. I don't think I would have been going through any of these thoughts or going through any of these processes if I didn't get sick. And as a gay man, I might have entered my 50s and 60s still thinking that body was the only thing that was important in sex and in relationships and all that. Now, and it's embarrassing just to say it out loud, is that now I'm realizing, it's all about the heart. It's all about the emotion. It's all about the person. So, was I shallow? I don't know. I don't think I was shallow, but I think I was probably, as a gay man, I was misguided by my own process. I was wanting to fit in by my own process. And now I don't care about any of that stuff. I can still be a gay man. I can still be sexual. I could still be all the things I want to be without having to associate it to my body. Because, having a disability, it disconnects you from your body in a way. May it be blindness or losing a limb or being in a wheelchair, you're disconnected from your body, from what everyone else is seeing.
So look, thank you once again, Joe, for
You're
your
welcome.
time today. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you and really fascinating. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to drop us a line, lawrence@releasehypnosis.com.au, and I hope you'll join us for the next episode. In the meantime, thanks, Joey.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.